Hello, today is Wednesday, June 3rd, and welcome to another episode of Money Tree. And this is your host, Patrick Zamiri. Glad to be with you again today. Now, before we begin today, I just want to make a correction about our upcoming guest on Friday in terms of his degrees. He has I misspoke when I talked about his qualifications. He has a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and a Bachelor of Science in Financial Management. This is in reference to our upcoming guest, Temuka Vusi Dube. Vusi Dube is coming out on Friday. His qualifications actually a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and a Bachelor of Science in Financial Management. So I just wanted to make that correction really quickly. All right, and so today will be another quick talk. And a lot of people, I guess, have been wondering about what my experience is in terms of what my background is in terms of financial management and so forth. And so I worked in banking for 12 years. I started off as a sales rep, went to eventually transitioned up into working as sales rep, got my insurance, got my license, and eventually went entered into eventually worked my way up from sales rep to advisor to actually being an assistant branch manager. And so it's 12 years experience working at some of the biggest banks in the world. I the beginning of my career was primarily sales and credit cards, but the majority of my career has actually been talking to people about financial products, advising them, and giving them recommendations as to where to put their money. And so I have extensive experience as it relates to banking over 12 years. And actually something that did not mention before is I'm actually one class short of getting an MBA in strategy and management, and so I've actually I'd completed almost all the courses. I had one class which was I was kind of struggling with the financial accounting part, which is why when it comes to financial accounting, I want to make sure I have good accountants on as guests. But basically, I'm one class short of getting my MBA. But in terms of business classes and so forth, I've taken all of them. And so in case well, you're wondering what my qualifications were, there they are. So today, I want to talk about the importance of liquidity, right? Having access to cash. And so, a lot of us who've been in the financial industry are familiar with the phrase "cash is king." And so, and why is that important in terms of growing your money tree? Well, look, investing is important. Putting aside money into vehicles that will grow is important as well. However, it's just as important to have an adequate amount of money aside to cover emergency expenses, to cover opportunities that may come up. Because sometimes if you're over leveraged and over invested, you don't want to be in a situation where you're over invested and then you come in a situation where you need a large amounts of cash to cover an expense. The the cash isn't there. The cash is locked up. The cash is in an account where you can't cash it out for a year or 6 months or so forth. And so one thing I advise my audience is that yes, it's good to put money in stocks, bonds, depending on what age you're in. It's good to buy health insurance, but you know have an adequate amount of cash available so that in the event that you lose your job, for example, you have at least, they say 6 to 12 months of savings. I say if you can have up to 2 years savings, liquid cash, that would be great. If you can do more, obviously more. And also, one of the big advantages of cash is when you are wanting to negotiate, when you're entering a business deal, when you're entering or simply going to buy a vehicle and you plan to finance some of it, having a large portion of the capital available as cash gives you an advantage in terms of your negotiating position. And so, again, I want to really, really emphasize that it is really important to have a to have a good amount of cash aside, a good amount of cash aside to cover major expenses, and also to give you the opportunity to invest or to spend as you may need. Now, earlier I talked about my MBA studies that I was one class shy of that. I actually went and got a bachelor's degree in a different field, master's degree in a different field outside of finance. But finance is where my passion is. Finance is where banking finance is where my emphasis, the focus of my education is. And so, yeah, I think it's I just wanted to talk to you today about my experience in banking. It was a wonderful career, but there was a time that came when it came to an end, and it was time to move on. But obviously, I'm very passionate about banking, clearly in finance, clearly with the channel that I've established. I'm passionate about financial management. I want people really to be in a position to get the education that they need in order to grow their assets for all the reasons we've talked about in the previous videos in terms of lack of job security and so forth for our generation. But today, again, the main emphasis, cash is king. Obviously, I think you should have a diversified portfolio. I think you should have, again, some money in stocks, some money in bonds. You should have some life insurance. I think you should, give yourself a balance. I don't think you should over leverage yourself. But just as important is an access to cash, and so is just as important. And I want to say really quickly, I've heard numerous people say that over time, real estate is the best investment, right? And over time, I think it is. It is. But this is my issue, though. If you have rental properties that are bringing you income consistently every month and you have cash flow, that's great, right? But as anybody with who's owned rental properties knows, sometimes you get a bad tenant. Sometimes you don't get a tenant that pays on time. And in a lot of states and a lot of countries, it's not easy to just kick somebody out who habitually has not been paying you rent. It can take months going to courts, and then the person can continue to stay, going to court, getting lawyers, doing all of those things to try to get the person out. But in order to facilitate all that, you need cash. And so, while investing is good for growth and so forth, and a return on your principal is good, is really, really important. I emphasize that it is good to have cash on hand that's just there if you need it for an emergency, and just have it as liquid cash, and it's sitting in an account. I know it may be boring. It may not be exciting to just get a couple percent interest on that cash, but the advantage is if you have a big emergency, big event, a big need that comes up, instead of now trying to think of, oh, what card do I access, what credit card do I have to access, you can use that cash. And even if you're somebody with a large credit line, at the end of the day, even if you can run up your credit card and pay it off in 30 days, that is still debt that you acquired in those 30 days, right? And so while I, you know, while there's nothing wrong with using credit cards to gain points for airline tickets, and especially if you're paying your balance off, at the end of the day, give yourself that cushion, give yourself that security. Have cash sitting somewhere in an account that covers you in case of a big life event. All right. Tell me what you think. I appreciate your comments, appreciate your feedback, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Take care now. Peace.